Yeah, I don't think it's a case that some plants don't like calcium. I think it's more a case of some plants don't even use calcium. So there's definitely no calcium in this pot, and the plants are growing. Yeah, just put this in there like this. There we go. Also put a tray underneath, so it's about, oh, I don't know, about an inch, I suppose. An inch? Yeah, about an inch. The old Henry VIII thumb length, taken and his foot taken as the standard unit in the foot. Some people don't know this stuff. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Things like, you know, most viruses are smaller than smoke particles. So if smoke particles go through a mask, a surgical mask, it's not going to stop the majority of virus particles. So yeah, and then we're going to have a big sweeping wave of tuberculosis like we had in the early part of the century, because everyone was were wearing masks and things like that back at the early part of last century. But anyway, so yeah, I know I've had terrible havoc with the birds this season. First season I've really ever had terrible havoc with the birds. Normally nothing, you know. You know, they eat the plums and stuff like that, but nothing untoward. But this year they just gone crazy. I've got a nest in the shed. I got one under the plants out there, and yeah, they just go crazy picking thing. Anyway, this thing I've kept it going. You know, the usual thing. You know, keep it sort of semi-flooded sort of thing. As you do, sort of thing. And I'm just waiting another month or so to see whether we get some sudden growth response like we did back in 2017, when we just had basically a bucket of sand with a newspaper, you know, cat litter newspaper cellulose ring around the outside, and it sat there for months, and suddenly you had all this amazing growth coming from almost seeming like nothing, you know, reasonably pure quartzite sand and a ring around the outside of you know, moist, damp newspaper cellulose, and suddenly you get all this growth. Whether the newspaper cellulose does actually have some nitrogen in it, and it takes time, and you get some sort of like a cascading reaction where, you know, a few microbes release enzymes and they start going down the pot, which starts releasing more, and so on and so forth. More microbes grow, release more enzyme, and it becomes like a cascading reaction. And then once all the nitrogen is used up by the plant, that's it, you've got to repot for next year. I don't know whether out in the real world you get a falling leaf litter on the surface of the soil. The what's it, the O0 horizon, whatever, or the naught. What does the O stand for? I did. Yeah, isn't it a colour? One of those old-fashioned words for colour, isn't it, or something? Meaning ash white or something like that, if I remember rightly. I can't remember now. I know it does have some. It does actually have a meaning, but it's a strange, historical, almost ancient sort of meaning of the O horizon. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, so I've done this, and I made a bit of a discovery the other night. Taking me back years and years, so I'm going to make up another pot, as I've done down here. Oh, by the way, before we get down there, yeah, this is urea formaldehyde floor foam. Just been getting going, and these are growing all right. So I mean, is it extracting the nitrogen from the urea formaldehyde floor foam? You know, Smithers Oasis floor, you know, Oasis brand floor foam. You might want to look them up. And yeah, I played around with this for years. The only time I ever got Drosera rotundifolia to germinate was on this stuff, and also I got Pinguica vulgaris. The only time I've ever got that to germinate and grow reasonably well was on Chuck Super Wipes. To get some washed out Chuck Super Wipes, you might want to try that. So yeah, alternative media, I don't know. I mean, I remember Donnie used to germinate some of his filiformis seed first in sphagnum, and then he would transfer them to a 50-50 peat and sand. Remembering, of course, his best medium that he came up with was 111 peat, sand and sphagnum. So it was the peat was the tea hatchery Canadian peat, and the sand was 140 micron K140 sand from the old Keoghs, which they moved back to the headquarters in Victoria, of course. So unfortunately, so we don't actually have a Keoghs here anymore, as far as I know. I don't know if they moved back, but I think it's been about decades since we had those. And we didn't realise we had Sloanes in this state. So for the whole time we had Keoghs in the state, we also had Sloanes. But the reason we didn't get Sloanes, or they weren't recommended, is because they had paper bags, and wherever you put them in the outside next to a fence, come the winter rains or the wet, the cardboard would just disintegrate, and your sand would, start spilling out, and if it's heavy bag, it will push out a hole somewhere, and you lose half your sand. Whereas Keoghs had plastic bags, and that's so in other words, for 30 years or something, they just bought one brand, and it seemed like the sole reason that they bought this one brand was the fact that they had plastic bags, and you could sit them out for a couple of seasons outside, rather than having them in under a shed, or having to have them undercover sort of thing. That's what it was. Anyway, I've set this one up with my new little bit of a discovery. It'll probably take a few weeks to get going, so I put it on the top sort of thing, and it will settle in, and it will start to spread out over the next few days. And I'll keep watering, on a daily basis, and I'll plant some stuff in it, and go from there sort of thing. This one I did actually put calcium in it, and it's, as you say, the difference around the same time as that other one, so they obviously don't like calcium. But I'm getting, as you can see, they obviously don't like calcium, because it's planted basically at the same time as that one. The difference is like chalk and cheese. Chalk and cheese, I know, haha. So it's not the fact that they don't like calcium, I think it's the fact they don't actually use calcium, which is quite a bit of an eye-opener. Anyway, having said that, we'll move on. As I said, I promised some lady on the internet who actually made a comment that I'd be making a clip midweek sort of thing. It's amazing, it's like 14 degrees here today, because I'm up in the hills sort of thing, and it's going to be 36 on Sunday. This is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's going to be 36. It's just crazy, we're having crazy weather. It's almost like between Ash Wednesday 1 and Ash Wednesday 2, we had a rather wet spring, and they said, oh, couldn't possibly have another Ash Wednesday, because in this state we had 2 Ash Wednesdays back to back, and they said couldn't possibly have another one. And of course the vegetation grew back thicker and denser than it did the previous one, and of course we had the really bad one that everyone in Victoria thinks we only had one, the one Ash Wednesday, but we actually had 2 back to back. And people forget that. The reason we had those 2 back to back was the fact we had a wet spring like this year, and as I said, we've had this 20-year millennial drought sort of thing, and been predicting we're going to have a major one. We had a reasonable one that burnt from, if you look at those clips, burnt from Dorset Vale Road through to Mount Bold. That stuff could still burn again, as I said, because we've had a wet spring sort of thing. So all that sort of undergrowth can burn, and that can get the remaining stumps and of trees and things like that. Once that gets started again, that can burn just like another bushfire sort of thing once it gets going. So anyway, I tried the cat litter thing, and I don't know, I don't remember it plumbing up this big before. All I remember last time, it was just sitting there, and it seemed to be doing that, and suddenly I came out, about an hour later, and suddenly, boom! Anyway, I'll leave it running and see what happens. See if we get some cyanophyta in the water or something. Maybe it'll be a different colour, I don't know. But it seemed very salty to me, just from the way I felt it and smelling it and all that. It seemed like I was tempted to take a bite, but I thought, no, I'm not a cat, so I better not. Anyway, oh yes, the other thing I want to say is, first of all, in all my, I've had 40 years of working with peat. I haven't used peat for about a decade, but for the previous 40 years of my almost 50 years, I suppose, I've been doing this thing. I've been through many peats. Started off in WA with the German peat, came over here, used a bit of German peat, had one season of the Irish peat, the one with the 4-leaf clover on it. Had a decade of New Zealand peat, had a bit of a go with Euro-Torf, I think. I've had a couple of seasons with Lithuanian peat, I think. And then in the late 90s into early 2000, I got into the Canadian TM brand peat through various bales and things like that, including a disastrous one that obviously sat out in the sun or something in black plastic bales. I obviously don't understand the Australian weather thing that, you know, any childhood plastic toy left out over summer is not going to be there basically in its nascent form the following season. It's going to crack up and break up because our sun is like X-rays, especially with our ozone hole down here, sort of thing. And anyway, it's been exactly 4 weeks today, 28 days today, and I've seen nothing. But what has amazed me is it's not staining the water brown like all the other 40 years of using peat on a yearly basis. All the brands that I've used in the past have always stained the water, and even when I was growing aquatic utricularia, you used to have tannin-rich water to, you know, from that. So, you know, whereas the Koya here has begun staining the water in a little over a week, sort of thing. So, anyway. And no staining in here. I've got the urethromaldehyde foam. I can always go back and do more experiments if you're a bit perturbed by putting them together. But no staining in the water from either of them, really. So, yeah, not the usual tannin-rich staining you get from peat, which I'm not getting now. So whether they've gone back to using old ways like using methyl bromide or something because of the lockdown, or, you know, because we've got all the global pandemic, scamdemic, or whatever's going on. I mean, you come on. You go to a restaurant with your mask on, you go sit down, you take your mask off, you're there with 120 people without a mask on, gas bagging away for 2 hours, drinking, you know, picking up bits of food and everything, sputum going everywhere. I mean, really, come on, wake your ideas up. Okay.